Bitcoin obviously doesn't have any rulers, right? It's rules without rulers, rather than these other cryptocurrencies, which do not have the attributes that Bitcoin does. So I think generally just more education, right? People need to be aware of and understand the differences between these two things, that Bitcoin is a completely neutral asset and its monetary properties are immutable. A lot of people don't understand this. They forget this. They think Bitcoin is a digital shiny rock, if you will, and it doesn't do much else. It doesn't store your value. It's purely speculative. But the reality is that Bitcoin, in a world of fiat debasement, is perhaps the most certain thing that there is. Obviously, I mentioned the supply dynamics of gold and silver, so I won't harp on that too much. But when you have a denominator that is debasing infinitely, right, and that is debasing at an accelerating rate, if you look at the DXY, the dollar index chart, it's cratering below levels that we have not seen in years. That's a signal that something in the world order is shifting. It's a signal that we're moving into a world where people value hard assets. They value hard money more than they do fiat currency. The only unfortunate aspect of that is that rather than flocking to the best hedge against that, which is Bitcoin, they're flocking to the monetary metals, which they've known, right, for the last several decades, the last several centuries, right? Time and again, when fiat currencies collapse, gold is what people rush to, right? During the time of the Roman Empire, what did they do to debase the currency? They clipped the coins, they melted them down, they mixed them with inferior metals, and you saw that over time. What we're witnessing with Bitcoin right now, unfortunately, is just a function of a lack of education in the market about what this specifically is. And so therefore it's traded alongside the tech bucket that it doesn't really belong in. And so it seems like a played out answer, and it seems like an answer that, anybody can say. But the reality is, like, when we talk about informational asymmetries, all that means is the market is pricing something differently than what it actually is. And so the way you correct that is with more information, more education. The upside of that, though, Robin, and for all the viewers at home, is that we understand Bitcoin's monetary properties. So we can purchase Bitcoin at a discount, right? If Bitcoin was trading the way it should be trading, it should be at $150,000, $160,000, $170,000 per coin if people understood that its monetary properties were the same as gold. In fact, it may be even higher than that, right? Because it has a smaller market cap, a smaller total size of the asset, but it's not, right? So Bitcoin is trading at a steep discount relative to its fair value. And so while we wait for the people with way more money than us to come around to this reality that Bitcoin well and truly does perform the same function as gold, just better, we can purchase Bitcoin at a very, very steep discount. And I thank God for that.
I love that. How much for that, how much of a role does also this small market cap? I mean, small is always relative because we are like one of the biggest assets in the world with Bitcoin, but relatively to gold, we are a small asset. Relatively to the whole real estate asset class, we are very small. How much does that also has to do with people trading it like a stock, because it is a similar size than a big stock like a Tesla or like an Nvidia or any of those?
I would say it has very little to do with it. And the reason I say that is because silver, when it began its monumental rally, it was right around the same market cap that Bitcoin is now. And so I would say that Bitcoin having a smaller market cap compared to gold as a commodity, compared to Nvidia as a stock, has very little to do with the reason it's still correlated with the tech bucket. But it's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the fun things that we do as men and as Bitcoin is we project Bitcoin's price into the future. What would Bitcoin's price be if X, Y, and Z happen? It's like astrology for men. This is what we do instead of going to therapy, right? So silver was about a $1.8 trillion market cap before it began this monumental rally in the middle of last year. Bitcoin right now at $90,000, as people can see behind me. Well, they can't see behind me because we have this layout on the screen, but I have a block clock. It's about $90,000 as we talk. It's $1.8 trillion. And so what we saw right now, silver, if I check my screen here, is at a market cap of $6.4 trillion. So that's more than a 3x from a sub $2 trillion asset. And it happened in less than 8 months for silver. And so there's been this narrative that because Bitcoin is growing into a very large asset, it's $2 trillion in size now. It seems really expensive at $90,000 per coin. That's another education gap. People don't realize they can buy 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is a larger asset than it's ever been before, Bitcoin's volatility is gone forever. and it's going to have diminishing marginal returns, and we're only going to see, you know, a 15 to 20% compound annual growth rate on Bitcoin for the rest of time. But the reality is that what just happened with silver over the last 6 months completely throws that idea out the window. It managed to go from the exact same market cap that Bitcoin is now to a $6.5 trillion market cap. And if that happened for Bitcoin, we'd see a Bitcoin price well over $300,000 at this point in time. With silver, it was solely a function of waiting for it to happen, waiting for the proper conditions. And so when we think about this in the context of Bitcoin, okay, if Bitcoin is traded as a risk asset, what's the natural next move for it? Well, first, risk conditions in the United States need to improve. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ and other equities have been doing all right. The S&P 500 is basically flat over the last month. The NASDAQ is up about 1.4%. Bitcoin being this extremely sensitive asset in the risk on bucket, you would think it would be higher than it is now, but it isn't, which is okay. So number one, risk asset conditions in the United States need to improve. Financial conditions need to loosen. And the good news is that they're slated to loosen, right? We have this extreme dollar weakness, which is very positive for liquidity. So the capacity of capital worldwide, that's the number one thing going in Bitcoin's favor. The other thing going in Bitcoin's favor is that there are a lot of rate cuts that are priced in over the next year. We're projected to go from the current policy rate, which is about 3.75%, all the way down to 3% before the end of the year. And given the fact that we're expecting a new Fed chair in May, Rick Rieder or Kevin Warsh or Kevin Hassett, all of whom have promised more rate cuts and said that the Fed needs to bring rates down lower than they are now, that's going to improve risk appetite. And so as liquidity expands and as policy rates come down, so borrowing becomes cheaper, the cost of capital becomes lower. You see a lot more capital expenditure, and you see capital move out on the risk curve. So when we talk about the risk curve, we're talking about assets in terms of their risk and return profile. At the lower end of the risk curve, you have things like cash, right? You have US Treasuries and you have cash, these things that either yield nothing or they yield 3 to 5%. Right, which is the current rates along the US Treasury curve. You move a little bit further out and you have commodities. You have gold, you have silver, you have platinum, right? That's where capital is flowing right now. So we are at basically the way that capital ebbs and flows. It moves up this risk curve as financial conditions loosen, and it moves down this risk curve as financial conditions tighten or remain the same. And so we've been in this regime where the Fed is cutting rates at the margin, but we haven't arrived at our terminal rate yet. And so if you take a look at all of these assets, if you take a look at this historical behavior for capital to move out on the risk curve, we're bidding gold and silver right now. The next logical step is that we move a little bit further out and we begin bidding equity indexes, right? So you would expect to see the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the Russell begin to outperform tremendously well relative to gold and silver. That's the next phase. And then the phase that will follow after that is capital moving into even riskier bets, right? So single stocks and Bitcoin. Unfortunately, that's what Bitcoin is most correlated to. It's highly sensitive to risk on moves. And so once we shift from this regime of mostly risk off with the gold and silver rallies to somewhat risk on with this capital then flooding into the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, the next thing that logically follows on after that, and we've seen this historically, is that capital moving into single stocks and into Bitcoin. And so I would anticipate Bitcoin wakes up from its current doldrums a while from now, if you will, right? So I tend to think, and I said this on Joe's show yesterday, that we're just going to continue to see consolidation over the next month, potentially through the end of Q1, right? As Bitcoin builds this base around the $90,000 level before ascending higher. Of course, there are risks to the downside. I did mention that silver, that back in 2022, Bitcoin did have a similar formation to what it's experiencing now. It failed to break above the 200-day moving average after falling underneath it, and then it proceeded to continue falling until it had a 75% drawdown. I tend to not think that will be the case. I tend to think that the capital flight out of risk-off assets into risk-on assets is probably a couple of months away. And until then, Bitcoin will just continue consolidating. Bitcoin right now is the same price that it was in early December, on like December 10th, right? So we've been flat for a month, relatively speaking. I tend to think that that's going to continue happening over the next couple of months until the rally in gold and silver are exhausted. And then that capital moves out on the risk curve into things like Bitcoin. So all that is to say, to answer your question, I don't think Bitcoin's small market cap is the reason that it's so correlated to the risk on bucket. However, from the performance of silver, we can glean what may happen next for Bitcoin, which could be a move from a sub $2 trillion asset to a $6.5 trillion asset, which would imply a Bitcoin price of over $300,000.
Which I think would shock a lot of people outside of Bitcoin. I think I look from a narrative perspective, like how do people actually look at Bitcoin outside of Bitcoin? That they just like barely glance at it and they're just like, how is Bitcoin doing? It has been tremendous to see how many people think 100K is like the lid for Bitcoin. It cannot go higher. Like they're like, yeah, now we reached the top of the mountain. How high can it go? And I think if we were to, let's say, in the next 12 months to like New Year's Eve this year, rip to like 300K, go 3x of that limit, I think this would wake up a lot of people. Now, I've said the same thing about Bitcoin reaching 100K. I was obviously very, very wrong. But I think it could really like waking a lot of people up if the money goes out of the risk curve into like Bitcoin and moving Bitcoin from a $2 trillion asset to 3, 4, 5, potentially over $6 trillion US dollars in market cap. There's I try to look at Bitcoin always from a narrative perspective, how the mainstream also looks at it. And we've come from like this tulip thing, this nerdy thing, this for criminal thing, this bad for the environment thing to, yeah, it's an asset that's speculative, but like there's some president that likes it, but like it kind of it's expensive. You cannot make huge returns anymore. But the talk of it going to zero kind of went away. The talk that like Bitcoin dies or it's bad for the environment, all of those thoughts around Bitcoin kind of died, even in the mainstream eye. Now I'm really curious to see what would happen. Not saying this will happen, just like what would happen if Bitcoin now rips 3x in like 1 year. I think it would. The shock would be huge, and mainstream media. I can't wait to see mainstream media reacting to like a huge Bitcoin bull run that might come.
I mean, Bitcoin's time inevitably will come, right? We've seen this time and again throughout cycles. But ultimately Bitcoin tends to go the route of max pain, right? So if a lot of people are expecting a bull market, chances are one doesn't happen, right? If you recall, Robin, like really close to the bottom in 2022, when we were at like $20,000 before Bitcoin puked all the way down to 16,000 where it stopped, people were not expecting a bull run. Most people were expecting Bitcoin to just die on the vine. And then within several months, the bull run really kicked off, right? And we managed to go from the year that Bitcoin bottomed, we managed to go from 16 grand to 26 grand. The year after that, we managed to go from 26 to I think like $64,000, and then $126,000 later, right? So we doubled, then we tripled, and then we doubled again, right? In 3 successive years. So right now, the key thing that I would be looking for is this capitulation event, right? This reality that sets in amongst the market that Bitcoin may finally be dead, right? Bitcoin has obviously been declared dead many, many times. And so what I'm watching for, apart from the technical levels, apart from the on-chain indicators, is for that final capitulation event to happen, for people to say and start saying confidently, this Bitcoin thing, it was a fun ride, but I think it's over. If and when we see that, I do believe that indicates that the bull run is really kicking off in force. And you do mention a really interesting thing as well, like this idea of the psychological impact of major moves in Bitcoin's price. For a very long time, $100,000 was this fabled level that if and when Bitcoin reached it, it would be like that would be the final price at which Bitcoin will have succeeded. We didn't see that, right? So we didn't see, and the assumption was like Bitcoin's going to break through 100, and then it's going to break through 150, then it's going to break through 500, then it's going to go to 1 million. So that's kind of the assumption that gets held by a lot of Bitcoiners time and again whenever it breaches a key level. I can recall back to 2021 when Bitcoin first hit that $60,000 mark. Everybody thought that it was going to $100,000 that year, and it took 4 more years for it to actually reach $100,000, right, in late 2024. So ultimately for me, what I'm looking for is that capitulation event, at least in the news, maybe not in price, but this maximum pain of just continuing to consolidate sideways. That's the number one thing I'm looking for. But then the second thing I'm watching is $100,000 was such a fabled level. For a very long time, nobody thought Bitcoin would hit 100K, that naturally you have a lot of selling pressure that is at or around $100,000. I mean, think about it. If you were a Bitcoin OG that's been holding Bitcoin since $100, $1,000, $5,000, I don't think you could call $5,000 BTC a Bitcoin OG, but at the very least, someone who's been here for 8 years or more. You never thought $100,000 was going to come. Well, I mean, I guess in some sense, if you were holding Bitcoin, you thought $100,000 was going to come, but it seems so distant, right? We saw the ban in China, and then the ban in China again. You saw all of these different exchange failures, from Mt. Gox to FTX to Celsius to BlockFi, all of these different instances of the world ending for Bitcoin, and then finally arriving at $100,000. What's the natural thing you're going to do? Chances are you're going to sell some or all of your stack. And that's the behavior that we've seen. We've seen this massive distribution from folks who hold a lot of Bitcoin, who've been holding for a very long time, distributing at $100,000, right? And a lot of people say like, oh, there's no dollar price at which I would sell my Bitcoin. But most people are lying when they say that, right? There is a dollar price that a lot of people have in mind at which they'll start scaling out of their Bitcoin holdings, because ultimately the same reason we hold gold is the same reason we hold Bitcoin, is to store value into the future and then eventually use that value for other things, right? Whether it's investment, whether it's buying a home, what have you. And so for the people who've been holding for a very long time, $100,000 has proven to be a huge level around which people sell. And so that could also be a factor that has played into Bitcoin's underperformance since October. We reached these heights that nobody thought Bitcoin would ever achieve. And even though this current environment should mean Bitcoin can rip higher from here, there's just a tremendous amount of sell pressure around the levels that we're trading at currently. And so even though Bitcoin wants to move higher, unlike any other asset, there's this key psychological level where a lot of selling pressure is happening. And I think that once that abates as well, once everybody who's been holding for a very long time finally sells their BTC at this level they've been waiting for years, that could be another constraint holding Bitcoin back that finally sends us higher. It wouldn't come as a shock to me at all.
The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC-free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. Yeah, this psychology level of, hey, I've held from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7K to 100K. I more than 10x, maybe even like 20x my money. And I now want to buy a house, or I want to kind of make a huge holiday, or like whatever you want to make with the money. All of a sudden you are able to do it. And there was this laser eyes till 100K. And then the 100K was there, and we didn't have laser eyes till $1 million. Like we kind of lost this like focus, like let's go 100K. There's a lot of like those, I think, the psychology things also in there. And it's also normal. Like if you held Bitcoin for 6 years and you made out of, let's say, 10 grand, like 100 grand, like, go ahead, like celebrate. like you held for 6 years, did nothing with the money. You held through a massive drawdown from like almost 70K to like 16K, you deserve a little bit. Like it's normal as a human behavior to sell some, maybe put something in a house, like retire yourself, like whatever you want to do with the money. It's quite natural, and you got a lot more wealthy. Like if you think about a guy that just has a normal salary, no companies, no other assets, just Bitcoin, and he dollar cost averages since the last 6 years, he got a lot more wealthy from Bitcoin, like a lot more wealthy from that. So him celebrating with whatever gift he wants to give himself, I think it's a very natural thing to do as a human being. The first thing that every Bitcoiner does, and the most important activity that every Bitcoiner keeps on doing, is buying Bitcoin. And I personally use Relay to buy and sometimes also spend or sell my Bitcoin. And there are two main reasons why I do so. The first one is it's Bitcoin only. They do not do any shit coins. They do not do any cryptos, any stocks, or anything else. This is a tool, an app that is fully focused only and solely on Bitcoin. The second one is self-custody. They give you the keys to your Bitcoin the moment you buy them. You never give them the control over your Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust them because you can verify that you and only you have the keys to your Bitcoin. There's no third-party risk. There's no freezing of your assets. There's no rug pulling. There's nothing of that. Download Relay, the app, on your phone, or go to relay.app on your browser and use code Robin to save fees and get cheaper Bitcoin. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because microseed is not selling the washer. microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io.